All righty. Well, again, thanks everyone for being with us. Let me just introduce the panel. With us this morning, we've brought a few folks who represent the sales community. We have Brian Hunt here from Sinclair, their SVP of National Sales and CTV. Joining us from Fox, Matt Jameson, Fox's SVP of Ad Strategy and Partnerships. And then from the buy side, two of the leading U.S. media agencies. With us today from Horizon Media, please welcome Danielle Marble. And from Canvas Worldwide, we have their SVP of National Video Investment, Tanya Zvankin. And last but certainly not least, from Media Ocean, the leading provider on the buy side, we have Drew Kane, who's their Chief Product Officer for Prisma. So thank you all for being with us this morning. Appreciate your insights. And so let's dive right back into this. If we were to work off the definition that we shared earlier, I'd like to take a few minutes to explore the impact that we have in realizing this dream as it reflects on people, organization, the processes that you all deal with, and then the supporting systems and products that are at play here. So I was curious to perhaps start from the sell side and understand, Matt, within Fox, have you been able to restructure organizationally such that your teams are able to support a full cross-platform deal with a single sales team as opposed to a lot of swivel chair and moving about?
Yeah, I would say about 8 months, 9 months ago when I came in, no.
Yeah.
I mean, just not really kind of how the business was structured, different networks, different processes, different sales teams, different operations teams, pricing and planning teams. Over the past, I'd say 8, 9 months or so, the question of should we do cross-platform isn't really a question anymore. It's been more about how do we calculate a lot of the ad tech work that we need to do and how do we focus our energy into building a convergent platform. So when I joined, there was already a sort of an internal sort of motion of Jeff Collins was coming on to run sales after Marianne left, and he had a much more sort of focused attention on what are our clients asking us for. We're sitting on a portfolio of not a lot of cable networks, but just enough supply in which we need to have an audience solution that goes cross-platform. A lot of tentpole events like the World Cup or Super Bowl, they're omni in the way that you could buy them and should buy them as a buyer, as an advertiser. So how do we pull together these sort of viewership patterns as well as kind of all these connective pieces to the media plan? What we've done is restructured the business that I'd say roughly now 55% of the organization is now underneath strategy and operations. So that leaves about 45% less, maybe less, that are just sales focused. And what that's done is it's just created a lot of inertia of basically like, we're going in this direction. How do we align and recalibrate some of our teams around one centralized planning view, one centralized yield team, and so forth? So like a lot of us that have come on since probably about November have been more focused on cross-functional responsibilities. And that's actually helped a lot with a lot of the push that we need to do in order to get to where we want to go. And I think we've made considerable strides over a very short period of time as we sort of think about the upfront windows and when do we need to have products out in market so that we can actually tell new stories to advertisers of how they think about Fox.
Awesome. So I don't imagine that was a snap of a finger in turning that battleship around, but were there any specific challenges you faced that you've been able to overcome in making the move?
Yeah, it's more about, I'd say, the tech challenges. I think when coming in, looking across news, sports, entertainment, and Tubi, all four on completely different ad servers. They're on all four different sort of data collection capabilities. So how we think about stitching together all audiences, permissioning, privacy, all those areas, as well as kind of just inventory, like the way that Google thinks about inventory and capacity is very different than our own homegrown sort of systems that we have in place for Tubi. So I would say less on the people problem, more on the tech than anything else. The people sort of problem is is probably a lot less a concern of ours. Fox has gone through a lot of transition over the years, and so there's just a lot of adaptiveness that the core kind of teams have. I think it's more about, how do we align a lot of different sort of service teams around the product that we're trying to build.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I'm quite curious, Brian, how has Sinclair been able to address that challenge?
Yeah, so I'm going to go at it from a little different angle. So we're Sinclair, we're primarily in the tier 3 space, so local DMA, a little bit in the tier 2 space where it's sort of multi-market, but with the exception of Tennis Channel, we're not really pitching sort of tier 1 brands per se to reach the whole U.S. So we have about 650 sellers in our roughly 85 markets that we operate in, and every one of our sellers can sell any product. So whether it's broadcast or digital, you may have heard Sinclair in the news recently. We've also, for one reason, we've also actually rebranded about 4 months ago to AMP Sales and Marketing. And one of the reasons we did that is because in a lot of markets, Salt Lake, you think of, we're the CBS station, or DC, we're the ABC station. And so about 25% of our revenue now is actually digital. And it's sold by our local sellers in our markets. And so we want to be thought of more as a digital sort of marketing services, marketing agency. We have about 20 digital products, CTV being the biggest, which is usually sold with broadcast. But we've aligned our entire sort of go-to-market strategy from a sales perspective, sort of with a digital-first mindset. We recently changed out our entire order management system on the digital side so that any one of our digital products can be ordered by any salesperson throughout the company, no matter which vendor we're using, and it's all pushed in one system. It's built out of one system. We're working through those iterations on the broadcast side too, but we're just looking at it from an omni-channel perspective, from our sales go-to-market perspective in the markets we operate. So it was quite a mess, 2 or 3 years ago. It was quite complicated, but we're sort of working through it, and we're excited. We're also, there's the whole measurement piece and reporting piece. We own our own reporting dashboard on the digital side, which is great. Every one of our digital products is sort of put into that system, so everything has a common look and theme. We also are able to export via an S3 bucket or different APIs to our partners who have their own reporting visualization tools. And so there's a lot of different pieces to this to sort of facilitate an omni-channel buy.
Awesome. So let's move over to the buy side for a moment, and let's keep the conversation with local. And I know, Danielle, I spent some time with Horizon several years back, and at the time when speaking to the team there, and I would pose the question, for a digital video ad, which of your teams is buying it? The answer typically would come back as, well, it really depends on where the client's placing their budget. That if this were a television, part of the television budget, our local television team is taking that. If it is digital, it goes with the digital team. Is that still the case today?
That answer is kind of twofold. For local, yes. On the national side, we have restructured, and those dollars are now being placed in an integrated investment team. Just due to the way local is bought and sold, we're still kind of struggling with the dollars, right? So we would love to have all the dollars on the local side, obviously, but depending on where the budget sits, some of our stuff is still being placed just linear on our team, and then the money still sits with the digital team. And we're finding even for the clients that we are placing for both linear and digital, we're still leveraging multi-market deals versus going market by market. We're finding that doing a client's entire footprint just gives us a little bit more scale, typically gets us a more efficient CPM, and just gives us more of a cohesive strategy across a client's footprint.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, it does seem to be a bit of a challenge at times, I know. But I'm curious, Tanya, from Canvas's perspective, you're a high-growth agency that hit the scene, probably about 6-8 years ago, doing some great work at automotive and elsewhere. What's the picture look like with your teams?
Our teams are trained to be cross-platform. So we are still have separate buyers for digital direct, because if you're buying programmatic on the YouTube, the likes of YouTube, the likes of Amazon, you need really dedicated buyers to be able to work that. However, digital is inclusive of all the linear function for the Disneys of the world. So it is somewhat still broken out because you can't do programmatic and streaming entertainment and linear in the same function. You can't be an expert at it all. You have to have programmatic on keys, working hard, doing their thing. Perhaps someone overall manages it, but you have to keep programmatic and direct separate as far as we're concerned. Yeah.
Awesome. And so, Drew, I know over at Mediaocean, you've sort of tackled this challenge in looking at how do you bring these divergent worlds together. A lot of investment, a lot of time spent with Prisma initially on the digital side and then trying to bring traditional media to bear on that. What have you seen in terms of adoption by the agencies across your client base and moving to being able to do a converged deal?
Sure, happy to talk about that. The silos are the really, we have a very interesting perspective because we are working with, just to give you a little perspective on Mediaocean, we are essentially, and Tanya and Danielle keep me honest, we're essentially the platform.
He's lying.
This is what we were talking about. We're the platform of record, and when I say that, the dollars are flowing through our platforms, U.S. and also globally. There's about $200 billion of activity that flows through our systems, all channels. And when we really work with agencies, in my history, I go back to agencies. I was at Mediacom and Group M, early 2000s. My office was next to the head of local TV buying, and Joanne Shaw, and she bought local TV. And now that's not the case at all. If I really go to the top of the process, strategy and planning is where I really see that it's come together across all channels. There's no one early days of digital, I think they all huddled off in the corner. They were like, oh, we're digital people, so we don't talk to you. But now you really can't have the start of the process, and I know we're going to talk about that, without having a clear, comprehensive, holistic view. And that's a first point of engagement. I'd also say when you start to get to, and it runs the gamut for us, what Tanya said around, and Danielle said around the way that the teams operate from an investment standpoint, I don't think there's anyone out there that's not in some form of video investment if they're working in television. Phrase talked about Pandora before. We've started to boil it down at Mediaocean into video, which is every screen. And the agencies are at different levels of working across those screens. You said it about the budget. I think that's 100% right, Joe, that sometimes it is budget driven, but you have TV video investment folks that are very much activating in that way, and they're very savvy in doing so. Sometimes it's taken on by the digital team. And when we're looking at that, we absolutely look at it through the lens of we have to be able to support everyone for wherever they are on the journey. And the questions we're going to ask are not about, necessarily, the safe word is always say AI. It's not about what AI can do. I really want to understand the outcomes. So when Tanya says or Danielle say, we're trying to execute, a DDV, a data-driven video buy on a specific audience, I want to send a single RFP, which you can't do today, then how do we light that up and let that happen? And we very much see it as we're supporting. We want to be with those folks that are on the cutting edge, and we want to be with folks that are, saying, hey, I'm going with local, and that's great. One thing I'll add, it doesn't end with investment. When you go through every part of the process, the folks that were running broadcast traffic very often are now running ad ops with digital and broadcast. So we're always looking at it through the lens of how can we bring this together. If it's in a view, that's the first place. I can see all my data together. Where we want to take it is to be able to enable the transaction in that way, because really that's where we're trying to get to. So that's, I'm basically saying we see it all, but we have seen it change quite a bit.
Awesome. So taking it back again to where we started, as I said, from a salesperson's perspective and a sales team's perspective, this may all sound great. You may have done all the back-end homework on your side to get your team structured, but you don't deal with 1, 2, or 3 agencies on a day-to-day basis. It's quite a large spectrum. So I'm curious to understand, what is the diversity of interaction like? Is it moving more uniform to where the buying community is able to work in that sort of streamlined fashion with you, or is it still a struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think about a convergent platform, there's like a bunch of different pillars underneath it. One is just inventory capacity. What's available for linear versus digital versus audio and so forth. Then there's insights driven areas of the platform. There's also just understanding of like how do you plan, and then there's the underpinning of like what's your identity spine, behavioral graph, and contextual graph, right? So agencies are very different in how they're thinking about this. Each one is unique. Everyone has a different planning tool and so forth. So when we were thinking about how to build this, it's one for internal purposes. We don't want swivel chair. We want one UI in which this can be put in the hands of planning teams and yield teams and so forth. We don't want to be in the business of building new UI dashboards for each holding company, but what's becoming consistent is we need to have clear connections of what a holding company believes an identity on an individual is that they're trying to plan for, and what we believe that is. And there's commonality there, and I think that's the first part, right? And each holding company or agency is in a different sort of state of that right now. But we want to solve for that, and once we solve for that, we can at least get part of the plans that are being more audience driven set aside, right? So if you're looking for very deterministic level sort of data sets in which your audience, you're looking for an outcome, you're very DR focused, that's one set. Then there's the how do we get high reach and so forth, which then goes into currency and linear and a bunch of different areas that like get a little messy, I think, for most part, because it's on not an agency level, but it's on an account level. So you need to have some level of optionality there. So I'd say like first and foremost, we've been focused more on how do we connect identity and audiences and what we believe is commonality between both. And then when you get further down into like the actual activation piece, the reality is that like linear is going to have more delays in which you can operate and deploy plans versus programmatic and real time and YouTube, type driven inventory. So I think that's where it gets a little bit. I'd say it gets a little bit off the rails on like how do you plan, but then how do you activate and how do you expect measurement to come back at some type of real time capability, which doesn't necessarily exist in both those areas. So.
And Brian, you finding a similar story over at Sinclair?
I agree with everything he said, but no, it's interesting when you get like again, I'm going to talk from the tier 2 and tier 3 perspective. So when you get a mid-market ad agency that's decent size and they send you an RFP on something for some omni-channel campaign, every one of them is different. Every one of them needs different things, and so even responding to that is sort of interesting. You talk about currency a little bit. Obviously, on the you've got sort of Nielsen and some extent ComScore on the traditional TV side, and then CTV is sort of a natural extension or natural reach extension, which obviously has some targeting and different things you can do with it because it's digital. But increasingly we're seeing having clients ask us, well, how do we increase our reach, and what's duplicated, what's unduplicated? Speaking of Mediaocean, we do, full disclosure, use Innovid for measurement, and so Innovid measures our duplicated, unduplicated reach when we're running a concurrent linear broadcast and CTV campaign, which a lot of our advertisers, especially in mid-market, really appreciate. There's another currency, iSpot does something somewhat similar, and so as more of these type of measurement or alternative measurement things come on that are more ACR driven with the traditional linear broadcast, it begins to change the currency. And so that gets really interesting because you can kind of see where the money wants to go, linear broadcast and or CTV, or do they both work better together? And maybe I pull money out of some other medium and put it into traditional linear broadcast and or CTV. So we're seeing a lot on the measurement side.
Now let's spend another minute or two on measurement and alternative currency. So I'm very curious to get the agency perspective here in that I think folks might want to think that it's the agency choice the agency decides I'm going iSpot all the way or what have you. But I suspect it's largely driven by the actual advertiser and the direction the advertiser is looking to take. After meeting with the agency and thinking about it a bit deeper. But Tanya, what's the experience been at your agency?
It's been a fun ride with measurement.
Yeah.
So just, I don't think that clients care as much as we think clients care. And I say that because they are looking for our guidance, right? They're looking for agency guidance. Where agencies really care is auditing. So it's easy to stand up and say, you know what, Video Amp is cheaper, Video Amp does the job, I already use Video Amp because I'm optimizing my performance, why not? Well, they're not accredited. So you can't stand up there in front of a client and say, well, because I believe so. Because we as an agency are not measurement process focused. That has to be driven by a third party. We're not out in the field making sure that what you're saying is real. To Fraser, your point, you like what you said Sky does. You get a black box and you agree. If that was the case, my gosh, everyone, let's use everyone. Let's have a measurement party for everything, you know? But that's not the case. The case is we have to stand up to our clients and say we did better against this other advertiser in our category in terms of costs, but they're using an accredited partner and we're using someone we think is good. And that has been the deciding factor, is building scorecards, building case studies, you know, user case studies where we show this is right, this is wrong. And every time the accredited ones will always win. And it just, because we're safer in a space where there's a third party validating our work. We can't judge our own homework, like we can't grade it.
Yeah, and I would just comment on that too. We have our, you know, I mentioned we own and have our own reporting platform. I have to use IAS for CTV because it's MRC accredited for CTV for third party because, again, we don't want to grade our own homework. But it's interesting too, every one of these, Innovid or iSpot or IAS, they all to some extent have to be integrated. They take development work, real work, time, money, to get integrated into these platforms. That's another consideration. We're always sort of peering around the corner. You know, what do you guys need next, right, for us to support? So,
So I'm curious, 5 years, 10 years out, how many alternative currencies or measurement providers do we think will survive?
The big ones, I mean, I think the big ones will remain because ComScore was first, right? Let's just call it. Nielsen came in. Video Amp is fairly new. I think everyone is going to have a purpose they serve. Like there's room for a Samba, and there's room for an EDO, and there's room for iSpot. They all do very different things, and I think it's important to be different because we try to use one-stop kind of shopping for, and that doesn't work for everyone. A really heavily driven based, performance-based account will require the likes of an iSpot versus a Nielsen, right? Nielsen isn't ready yet to deliver performance. So you have to somewhat pick and choose based on client, but it's exciting, and I think everyone has a place.
Yeah, I will add, we don't want to conflate measurement and currency, right? All currency is measurement, but not all measurement is currency. So when Tanya says, like, who will survive as a currency partner, I do look, we've looked at it as there's somewhat of a model of economics here, where if you pay X for a specific currency provider, you don't have 4X to spend for all of them. And that's a reality on all sides. And we recognize that. But as Media Ocean, we are completely agnostic. What our goal has been is really to understand, as we were saying, I'll use linear as the example. 4 years ago, you know, everyone's saying, oh, we need to support more, you know, everyone as a currency provider. We've been supporting ComScore on the local and national side for over 10 years when they were Rentrack. But it really became to bear that this is something we need to make happen because we do have agencies asking for that. That's where the demand was to say, we want to execute not just on age, sex, numbers, we want to execute on advanced audiences and data-driven linear. And I think, Tanya, what you said around if you have agreement between buyer and seller, MRC accreditation goes far. I've had advertisers that literally said, we will not allow us being bought if it's not. But at the same time, there are folks that are transacting on that. And one of the big things we did was coming to market with advanced audiences over 2 years ago so that folks that were doing things outside of system for years are doing it in system. And if you take it back to the cross-measurement conversation, you're starting with strategic or advanced audiences inside of linear, but that extends to CTV as you look at targeting, and that's where our focus is now, is how do we wrap that all in a bow? So what we're doing, you'd mentioned Innovid. We acquired Innovid last year. It's video ad serving. It goes with flash talking really well. I'm not going to pitch you all. Just we can later. But on the XP side, it is around cross-media measurement. And what we're looking at now is how do we inject that into our platform? It's not about support measurement all day. I kind of couldn't care less in the sense that I want to know the use cases it's going to support. Is it going to support planning? Is it going to support in-flight optimization? Is it going to support reconciliation at the end? And if we're doing that and doing it with, we call it sort of the 4 V's of measurement, kind of like the 4 C's of buying a ring. You've got the velocity of how fast the information's coming to you, variety, the EDOs, outcomes, it runs the gamut, velocity, variety. You have the volume, these large data sets. And lastly, the veracity. We don't focus on the veracity in the sense that someone else is telling us that that holds truth. But we are so excited about supporting that in the platform. That's like incumbent on us to support you all in what you're trying to do. We think it's just super exciting. I just do like let's distinguish between measurement and currency, because currency gets into the nuts and bolts of the plan to pay transaction. That's the other part of the cross-media, let's say one of the challenges.
But they are going to commingle.
Of course.
So just one
Yeah,
last
what do you
point
mean?
is
Yeah.
because you will transact, on a Samba, right? You will transact on an EDO if that is your core performance, right?
1,000%. If you say to us inside of Prisma that my KPI or my form of measurement or what I'm going to, reconcile or post on or however you want to talk it, yes, you can actualize on that. And that's where we're working with the partners. Joe, you said at the start, this is not something like Mediation. Our ego went with my hairline. It's like we literally are about, the integrations are hugely important. We're system of record, we're automating, we're creating efficiency and effectiveness, and auditability, but at the end of the day, if we don't work with the publisher side, if we don't work with all the tech partners, it's a fail, period.
I'm curious to hear from the buying community the challenges you face in explaining to your clients the comparative value of delivery between digital and linear platforms, the confusion over conflicting measures and all that, and how you've been able to align that for them to better understand what delivery value they're getting in a cross-platform deal.
I'll speak to that on the local side. So a lot of the struggles that we have right now with doing cross-platform is system-based and reporting-based, right? So how are we educating the client on, hey, we are posting our linear schedules off of Nielsen, but all of our, advanced products are done, the reporting's all done outside of the system, right? So, sorry, Drew, we are a freewheel system for the most part. The agency uses freewheel.
You use us for some stuff.
Yes, we do use for a little bit. But we really struggle, and a lot of the reporting is done manually, right? So we're having the buyers who are the experts in the market doing the linear stuff and the linear posting off of Nielsen, and then the client managers are handling all the reporting from Innovid or from our third party vendors, and then we're manually kind of converging that data to give the clients the holistic picture of what really happened in the market, and a lot of it is just education, right? So an impression is an impression. And we do a lot of education about, we really see the value in extending your reach through CTV. And I think just doing that is really important so that they understand an impression is an impression. And you really need to be in both spaces in order for you to hit your key target and to do it effectively.
You would agree?
Absolutely. We currently, my issue with, and the challenge is, and I'm going to say it, it's after what has run and how, to your point, how you put it together. Billing cycles on digital are versus linear are different. Delivery and how you manage versus end of month impressions, different. Audio, different. Everything is incredibly different. And I know what you're going to say, Drew. We have the systems in place to put it all together, but not one system is perfect. And we're still somewhat left we're buying it, but we're clearly buying different things. We're trying to say video is fluid. Video via tech is not a fluid proposition. We have to be honest, right? Video, you have to manage it differently. You have to position it differently. It delivers, every single platform delivers different outcomes. You know, when you're going one-to-many versus one-to-one, those are all things that we have to consider. And it is complicated. It's not as easy as pressing a button and getting a report the way it used to be out of Donovan. It is, but it is very challenging and it's very time-consuming. And we're hoping AI will eventually help with this. We've all started the process of somewhat integrating AI systems to be able to do the harder, shitty things that we don't like to do. And hopefully that will help, but we can't be blind to the fact that it's different. We want it to be in our heart. We're planning it holistically. We have all the, like, it's there. The inspiration's there, but it's different.
So it seems to me that whether you're a buyer, a seller, or a solution provider, the challenge at the end of the day is how do you remove friction? And that friction can be, take various forms. You know, if we go back to the good old days 30 years ago, where all we had to worry about was linear television, from a seller's perspective, it all centered around the linear traffic system. You had this one box that really got the job done. It was the workhorse. We move forward into more of a digital age, and it would be nice to think that my linear traffic provider then is the one-stop shop that does it all for me. But what we've seen is, and on the buy side as well, various upstarts, you know, on the buy side, as ad servers came about, would have been nice to think that, well, you know, Donovan Media Ocean, I could just go to one stop for my ad serving. But we see proliferation, growth, and all of that. And so what it introduced for, I think, teams on both sides was what we call the swivel chair effect. And so what we're beginning to see now is on both the buy side and the sell side, people going back to their legacy providers and saying, how far can I push to get back towards, you know, a single solution? But if I can't, how well will these players work to integrate, to interop, so I don't swivel chair? We were meeting with a large local group recently who said that, you know, as clean as I can get it on the sell side, I still then have to swivel over to Prisma so that my sellers can enter detail into the buyer system. So where do we see ourselves in terms of getting the solution providers to get to a point where we can reduce swivel chair, and what are the challenges for us?
I mean, I'll take it from the approach from Fox, and what we're trying to do is like, so the whole convergent idea of building one sort of stack where we have inventory and everything else available to us is to get to a place where we can use AI agents to essentially directly talk to an agency in what they want to build. And therefore, the simplicity is that if buyer goes in and says, I'm looking for this reach, this outcome, this audience, et cetera, on these inventory types, we take a lot of the friction that's been going on our side, which is planners having to go into multiple different systems to traffic things, to look for inventory and so forth. And like, essentially, the first part where AI, I think, plays a really heavy role in that is us focusing on linear, because those trafficking systems and everything are antiquated. In order to try and catch up to the digital world, we definitely need to like focus on the amount of people that it takes to actually process an order and get it live, right? And so we're kind of looking at it as like a pitch to play AI opportunity that we're really kind of investing a lot of, you know, time into what is the actual operational sort of processes and where are the things that we can cut down the human power there. I think 2-3 years down the road, I don't know where we're going to be with individual agencies. I had head of an investment on a very large holding company say to us, like, not all of our clients are going to be on board with like the AI automation of, you know, an agency, you know, AI agent talking to an internal sort of publisher or programmer and trying to get plans that way. It's not necessarily where we think we're going to be. We think be certain clients that are going to go in that direction and others that are not. But we just want to be there, right? Because there's other things that are happening in the industry around programmatic and digital. 4 or 5 days ago, there was an ad CP announcement of like having commonality around programmatic and how that is going to work with AI agents as well. And so linear has to get there because digital and programmatic are going to be there at some point, and those two things are going to collide. And then you're going to see this sort of shift happen within the agencies, which sort of disadvantages linear in a way, right? Because simple is good for agencies, good for sellers to sell inventory. So that's why the focus has been more linear based for our side, is that we still know the power of what linear TV provides, and we still know that it has a tremendous impact on the overall digital plans and audience plans. So that's just kind of my commentary, my take on it. But
wow, it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
I'll throw something else out there. So when you have a linear broadcast stream, and if you're depending on which affiliate you are, NBC or CBS or whatever, and which affiliate group is negotiated with which virtual MVPDs. You potentially could have a situation where your, CBS station or ABC station or NBC station is actually taking a linear broadcast feed that has an ad in it. It's digitized, and it's actually running on YouTube TV, or Hulu or whatever. So you're actually already in a streaming environment, right, instead of linear. And so that impression is an impression. What's even more complicated sometimes is if you're buying an ad, let's say on Hulu, they actually add co-viewing in some instances. So and there's nothing wrong with that. They say that there's more than one person in the living room watching TV, and it's 1.5. So we're going to add 50% impressions, and that's sort of what you're going to get, as opposed to locally in our markets, when we have our apps, we sell one-to-one impressions. So you sort of get a 50% bonus when you're in there, right? And all of that affects the delivery and the price, and you're trying to sort of manage that. So until there's some industry standards that are developed, and I think that's where really we need to go in terms of the what you're actually buying, and then at the very end what you're measuring, and it may come in the form of some folks getting together, maybe in digital watermarking of the creative that's counted at the glass level instead of some other way. Like it's looking at different sort of out of the box concepts of how to measure all this stuff, because it's coming in so many different formats, and all the poor, from a planning perspective, all you guys want to do is, hey, I want to reach 5 million people in this demo and these geographies and that. And so there's a lot that still has to be done to sort of harmonize that across the ecosystem.
Well, I think what you all can see is that we've touched on what is a very deep, very broad topic here. I hope you all continue the conversation after today. The good news here is that we as an industry need the people in this room to help figure it out. I know, Drew, you're wanting to get a final
I'm just
comment
chomping
in.
at the bit because I don't want folks to leave thinking that somehow we've told. No, I had no pitches. At the end of the day, we are not here saying we have actually solved it all. Like, our first step is get onto Prisma across all channels so that you can operate in that way. The second part is, talking a little bit about agents. When you're in that platform, the first thing that we said is it's essential that we have the right APIs in place, essentially passing data back and forth in a more seamless way that can be lit up through the entire process. So when we stop swivel chairs is we have a Meta integration, we have a TikTok integration, so that it is seamlessly passing information back and forth all through the transaction. And the other side, two things I'll leave it with are, we've seen it through the lens of a lot of folks that were linear want to see things like CTV as an extension of TV. Yeah. And people that are digital are like, oh, this is digital. So we're trying to navigate, Tanya, you even said in that stream, where we want to be able to light up all the additional information and data that comes with CTV. But we also then have to consider, okay, when it's time to reconcile, do I need to reconcile the national and local spots that ran against the times that they ran in the old way? Or am I just looking at the audience that delivered? So there's like quite a bit there to look at, but that's what we really do have been hopefully reaching across the aisle, both on the publisher side, partner side, and otherwise, because at the end of the day, it's buy side, sell side in terms of how you want to work. It's your technology providers, with a lot of you building your own tech and secret sauce, which we want to be able to make unique to you in our platform. And then every other constituent, measurement, and other folks that are part of the process, because they're integral. If we can talk to them all, that's for us like gold.
Awesome. Let's open it up, see if there are any questions from the audience this morning. Anyone?
Not really. Never. Sorry.
So I'm going to hit one final round here then. What we're seeing is an incredible amount of M&A activity in the market right now, both in terms of acquisition of sell-side heft, but also some spin-outs. We're seeing a major agency merger happening, any moment now for final closure. And I'm curious to understand from everyone, in terms of helping address these issues we've talked about this morning, a good thing or more challenge ahead?
I think it's a good thing for our business. We've had a really healthy business for quite some time. We joke about second mover, third mover advantage, but it's been very deliberate, the strategy of not launching a D2C app until recently, right? We very deliberate in kind of how we sunsetted or sold the 21st century assets to Disney, right? We are very focused on the live areas of our business, right? Live sports, live news, live entertainment and programming. That's been very deliberate. So I think while we watch all the other different programmers in market be challenged with spin-offs of cable nets and so forth, we're left with a very sort of simple portfolio, which has done really well for us in upfront because of the amount of reach that each one of those properties provide. I think that puts us in a very good position for the future, and I think that's a again, deliberate and calculated move. So I'm interested. I think it allows us some breathing room for a year or change here to build the right tech infrastructure to support other M&A activity, so that we have one core infrastructure in which we can bring in other companies to be part of that, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the FANG companies, you look at Amazon and Google and the others and YouTube TV and sort of what they've done to sort of the video business and how they've come in and created a share, it's a bit scary for sort of a linear broadcast. And I speak for myself, not for my company, but as many of you are aware, on the broadcast side, we're limited to 39% reach of the U.S. And so there's a huge merger right now under consideration of Nexstar acquiring Tegna, which in essence, the FCC is going to have to come out and sort of set what those new ownership caps are. That will profoundly sort of change our industry in terms of what the answer to that is. And you're going to see some natural, M&A and consolidation. And what's interesting, we produce a lot of news. And what many of you don't realize, we all live in, for the most part, top 10 markets in New York, and every station has news. When you get beyond market 20 or so, it's really hard to make money in news. And you get to market 100, we've got Boise, Idaho. You may have one station that produces news, and they're probably losing money doing it. And so those are the only journalists in Boise, Idaho. There's no newspaper there anymore, right? And so if you don't raise these caps and sort of make a healthy business, you're not going to have local journalism and local news anymore. And so it's super important. So there's a lot going on in our industry over the next year, and you sort of need that scale to really compete against those FANG companies, if you even can compete just in terms of the size of it. So I'm excited, actually, what's going to come here in the next year.
Makes a buyer's job easier or harder?
I think a little bit easier, hopefully. Something we struggle with is standardized pricing, right? So how do we get to a point where I'm paying the same CPM for the same product in Atlanta that I'm also paying, for example, in Boise? So I think having less, technically, companies to have to worry about that with and negotiate with would benefit the local side for sure.
I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about acquisitions, our biggest challenge with acquisitions right now is sports, right? And how they're just everywhere. And being able to follow the reach and the games and everyone owns a piece
As
of
a Yankee
everything
fan, it's
between
been
the
brutal.
Amazons. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that part is really tough to navigate because then the minute it goes to a new partner, then yeah, the pricing changes, the flexibility changes, and as flexibility becomes more and more important, all of these things are not easy to stop buying things, guys.
So final item, 2 weeks ago at Adweek, it seemed you couldn't get into a session if the topic didn't have AI somewhere within it. Where are we on the hype meter here in terms of what you're experiencing within your agencies, your station groups, and what have you?
Thankfully, Copilot lets me know when I have tone in my emails. Thank you. We have started integrating into our team. So we do ask our teams to run your emails by a Copilot. We have started to ask our teams, to look at your Excel charts, for instance, ask them to help you build a story. Storytelling through AI is amazing. It really helps you grasp and tell that data story across the board. So those are the things that we're using it for, efficiencies, and we call it impact, right? And the I is impact that you can create through using AI rather than efficiencies or taking away jobs. Make yourself better rather than trying to get rid of yourself.
I'd like to piggyback on that. Verizon is really driving a huge agency-wide initiative on AI, right, and how we use it in everyday workflow. Again, not to replace people, but how you get away from doing the mundane, everyday tasks that really eat up a lot of our time, that takes away from the buying. So I think Verizon, obviously is using it on the planning side, and we're already seeing really big benefits on how we're reaching key targets and keeping them engaged. But I do see in the future really helping take away from and like automating some of the processes that really take up a lot of our time right now.
Right. And I know, Matt, you already mentioned AI at Fox, and
Yeah.
I've seen that you guys have really gone into
Yeah,
the deep end here.
I think also, companies are interchangeably sometimes using machine learning and AI like way too often. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of our companies have been doing that are more machine learning. I think, again, we're using AI in sparingly sort of ways. One that we've actually seen the most impact, and it kind of goes to your point about news, is we launched a contextual project with a company called Mobian, which essentially is like the taxing part from our editorial sort of teams of news is they're always producing content, they're pushing out more videos, and that needs to be tagged. It needs to be tagged appropriately with the right keywords and so forth that like programmatic buyers and just digital buyers can buy. So we've deployed that not only for just tagging purposes and automation around it, but it's actually taking out all the actual natural language that's actually happening in the transcripts and so forth, and then applying it to tone and sentiment, which has become a major issue here within the way that our politics have been working in the U.S. is some of the antiquated sort of systems that we've been using to block news because of keywords just isn't the same way that video works. So I think that's one area that I think we've seen the most promise is like how do you take your bias out and really kind of focus on outcomes because news is a very critical part and has sort of been disenfranchised from pricing across the board in CPMs in the industry and still is a massive reach opportunity for advertisers and frankly drives really considerable good outcomes when looked about holistically. So
Excellent.
Yeah, we're really embracing AI from our salesperson's perspective. We have a new CRM. We're in the process of sort of launching and integrating. It's going to have sort of built-in AI tools. We're making it mandatory for all of our salespeople to sort of have a certain training with AI. It can be incredibly productive for using different agents to manage your schedule, integrated with CRM, telling you what to do, sending emails with certain tone, and based on your clients, what we know about them in social media, it would actually change the tone of the email you're going to send to them. And so we're really looking at that as how to go to market the best we can using AI. Also using companies like Waymark that are integrated into some of our more tier 3 spaces that are vendors who are using AI very successfully and sort of giving our salespeople access to that. On the negative flip side of AI, one issue on the planning side is if you use Gemini or ChatGPT-4 or any others and said produce a media plan for $1 million to reach, men 25 to 54 in the top 20 markets that are in the market to buy a car, and it will spit out something, right? It's going to show broadcast television at, 10% instead of 50%, which is what it's viewed at, right? And so a lot of the people who are producing AI are the Googles of the world and that own these algorithms, and they are favoring their own media. And that's a big issue that, as an industry, we're beginning to look at how to address that. And that'll happen over time, but it's not quite accurate at this moment.
Awesome. Well,
And
final thought?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to tell you 3 main uses. I mean, we're a technology company. We should have an AI usage. 3 main things. 1, productivity of our own teams. So we're seeing that, if we can have our developers 20% more effective or more productive with AI, that's faster innovation, faster to market. Use cases, automation that benefits our customers in application. And the last is folks are building out AI on their side, how we work together with other partners. Always being mindful of 2 things. 1 is we don't want to build solutions looking for problems. That's just a waste of effort. And the second is you have to be really mindful of data implications and what you share, what you don't share, what you commingle, and what you don't. So we want to do it very responsively and thoughtfully.
Tremendous. Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists this morning for a very engaging conversation and making my job very easy. So